So as a former police officer here, when I was a police officer, I loved the police service. I loved the people I worked with. I had a lot of respect for the men and women I work with. Today, what I'm finding is, although I have a lot of respect for the rank and file and many of the people I worked with, the administration and the decisions that I'm seeing that are being made in this trial is very unnerving. I mean, we're seeing, and it's not just this Helen Grus trial. It's also the doctors that have been suspended for shielding their patients when they received exemptions from the COVID shot.
Right.
It's them. It's anyone speaking up against the COVID shot. And that's what the root of this is. It's the COVID shot.
To see the lawyers get up and say they're going to make a criminal charge in the middle of a proceeding, a tribunal, was absolutely shocking.
Robert Krychek, Rebel News, Ottawa, Ontario, day 14 of the disciplinary tribunal of Constable Helen Grus, who is being accused of discreditable conduct by her employer, the Ottawa Police Service, for inquiring about a possible link between a rise in infant deaths that she'd observed in 2021 and 2022 relative to previous years, and the so-called vaccination status of the decedent infants' mothers. In other words, she was inquiring about a possible link to very young children, babies, and the so-called COVID-19 vaccines that may have been accepted by their mothers. Folks, we need your financial support to do this sort of in-the-field journalism. So to keep these reports coming, assuming you value and appreciate them, please contribute to our operational costs. Visit rebelfieldreports.com and contribute what you can. Specifically, there are 3 parts to the accusations against Helen Grus by the prosecution. Number 1, that she inappropriately queried the Records Management System, the RMS. It's a database used by the Ottawa Police Service to manage its cases. Number 2, she's accused of failing to make notes of her queries of this RMS database. And number 3, she's accused of interfering with an ongoing investigation of an infant death by inappropriately contacting the decedent infant's family. So today we saw continuation of something that started yesterday. Helen Grus was expected to take the stand to testify yesterday in her own tribunal, but did not do so after she received an email minutes before she was expected to testify from Hugh O'Toole, who is the head of the Ottawa Police Service's Professional Standards Unit, the PSU. The PSU is like internal affairs at the OPS, ostensibly examining, investigating allegations of misconduct from Ottawa Police Service officers and employees. O'Toole wrote to Grus in an email. He warned her, advised her that she was not permitted to use any OPS documents in her testimony. Blair Ector, who is one of Grus's attorneys, said that this email amounted to witness intimidation, which is a crime, and tampering with an ongoing legal proceeding. Today, he said that he and his colleague, the other lawyer for Grus, her name is Bathsheba Vandenberg, were going to file a police report as witnesses to a crime, the crime being witness intimidation. Now, Chris Renwick, who is the hearing officer, the de facto judge, the trier of fact overseeing these proceedings, refused even to take notice of this. He would not examine the email. He would not receive any remarks from the defense team regarding this allegation, these statements, and proceedings basically fell short as a result of that. Today's proceedings also came to an abrupt end. Normally they're scheduled to end around 4:30, 5 o'clock. They ended about 2 hours early today because the defense team filed a motion or request to have the lead prosecutor, Vanessa Stewart, dismissed for misconduct. They accused her of also engaging in an aspect of intimidating their client. Why? Because Vanessa Stewart several times has said that she is putting the defense team and Helen Grus, the defendant, on notice to not use any Ottawa Police Service documents. Now, Bathsheba Vandenberg, one of Grus's lawyers, said that there was no OPS policy cited by Vanessa Stewart to justify this demand that no OPS documents be presented. She also said that Chris Renwick, again, the hearing officer who has accepted these conditions from prosecutor Vanessa Stewart, himself has not provided the policy justifying this restriction. In other words, the prosecution and the hearing officer almost always agree that OPS documents cannot be introduced by the defense as exhibits or evidence in the course of these proceedings, citing some sort of generic privacy concern. More broadly, Vanessa Stewart, the prosecutor, has said that her client, the OPS, has not permitted, has not authorized or given permission for its own documents to be publicly disclosed in the context of these proceedings. Now, why is this important? Because Helen Grus, in some instances, requires the citation of these documents in order to make her argumentation, to make her defense. One thing I forgot to mention during yesterday's video report dealing with Wednesday's proceedings was an implication by lead prosecutor Vanessa Stewart that Helen Grus had somehow been violating medical confidentiality in her RMS queries. Now, the RMS database can occasionally include medical information about individuals included in case files. And Vanessa Stewart stated that in order to obtain medical information lawfully, appropriately, there must be either judicial authorization or a medical release form. In other words, a sort of permission granted by the person whose medical information is being sought or collected. Now, why is this problematic? Why is this hard to take seriously? It's because some medical information is obvious on its face and cannot be kept confidential. For example, consider a person who may be in need of a wheelchair. His or her requirement for that medical accessory cannot be hidden in most instances.
It should be noted that inquiring about the vaccination status of parents is a standard question asked of parents of deceased infants by the Ottawa Police Service when it engages in these sorts of investigations. What Helen Grus was double checking on was whether or not the so-called COVID-19 vaccines were included in that line of questioning.
So I'm here with Amanda, aka Legally Purdy. So she's been in proceedings the entire morning with me, and I want her to share with the audience some of the developments we saw this morning. So what are the major takeaways? We saw a bunch of wild stuff in there.
Yeah, I've got to be honest, I'm shaking. What happened was, Defense Counsel Blair Ector, he has a document that he wants that shows that Helen Grus was actually threatened yesterday not to release any information. And he was trying desperately to speak just now. So let's back up actually. Anyways, well, they were trying desperately to speak right now, and the hearing officer wouldn't let him speak. And he stood up and basically said, I'm going to go press criminal charges. I was witness to a crime. This is intimidation. And basically the hearing officer recessed immediately, and Blair and Bathsheba and Helen got up and they're off to file a criminal report.
Many of the issues with her investigation, such as bringing experts to the table to explain the medical sides, we're talking about doctors, we're talking about that sort of thing, have been denied by this tribunal. This is a miscarriage of justice, because the whole point of her investigating this, which she's mandated by law to do, is to be thorough in the death of children. And she noticed a spike in child deaths. She went to investigate it. And because it all has to do with the jab, the COVID-19 shot, there are so many people up in arms, they don't want to hear the truth. So having been at this trial now for 2 days, what I've seen from the adjudicating officer is an absolute bias towards the prosecution. And yesterday was very pivotal, because I watched the defense, so Detective Grus' defense, raise the issue that the adjudicator is acting as a second prosecutor, objecting on behalf of the prosecution. And sheepishly, once his face turned all red, he actually agreed that he should step back and allow the prosecution to do the objecting on behalf of the prosecution. So that was a huge pivotal moment regarding the bias that we're seeing in this case. Numerous times we're seeing the defense trying to put arguments forward and they're being interrupted.
Yeah, so I found it interesting too that Miss Stewart had concerns about a late application, but the OPS has been doing late applications and late motions and late disclosure for the last 5 months in all of the Freedom Convoy trials. So when the pot starts calling the kettle black, especially when it's your police service, it's extremely terrifying, especially if you have your own children who might find themselves in a situation like this. And this is one of their own. This is somebody who dedicated her life to Ottawa police and dedicated her career to finding out what was going on with sudden infant death. And to sit here and watch this is so upsetting. Like, to see the lawyers get up and say they're going to make a criminal charge in the middle of a proceeding, a tribunal, was absolutely shocking.
And one of the key factors that I've seen is that when the prosecution makes an objection, the court will hear what the prosecution has to say. But when the defense makes an objection, instantly the prosecutor objects to the objection or to the motion that the prosecution's push or the defense is pushing forward, and the prosecution's allowed to be heard by the adjudicator. So you can see how lopsided this is becoming. I mean, from any casual observer of this case, you don't have to have any sort of legal training to see this is not a fair trial. Like, you don't see it. And now we have allegations of criminal offenses of intimidation being put onto Detective Grus by members of the OPS. And the adjudicator today said he didn't want to hear it. He didn't want to see the evidence of it.
The next time we come back to court, we need to fill this entire building. They need to know that their attempts to cover up what they are doing isn't working. Okay? You need to follow Rob. You need to follow Legally Purdy. And when I tweet about Miss Grus, please retweet it, because the more people who have their eyes on this, the more the hearing officer and Miss Stewart are not going to be able to cover this up anymore.
We're watching history being made here because Detective Grus really is like the Canadian version of Serpico. She was given an opportunity to sweep this under the rug at no cost to her. But the document that she was going to sign, she said, this is inaccurate. I can't sign. This is not true. And so she took on this burden of defending herself, and she's out money. We need to support her in any way we can. The association is supposed to be paying her for her legal expenses. They denied her legal expenses. I mean, this is ridiculous. What's going on?
The association, that's the union.
The police association, it's correct. It's essentially her union. Right. The police association has denied her expenses. She was charged for doing her job, and they denied it. So if you really take a step back and you look at it, everybody's got their finger in this COVID pot. You have the association, you have the prosecution, you have the police service, and then you have Detective Grus on the other side, who's standing up for the rest of us who have questions. I've seen so many people who didn't get jabbed. I didn't get jabbed. I didn't want to get jabbed. It's my choice. What I put in my body's we've heard that so many times. And now suddenly, after the fact, we see how useless this shot was. How many people are now getting ill because of it. Right. So these are valid concerns that Detective Grus is raising, and this is why I'm here to support her.
So proceedings are still up in the air. It is unclear when they will resume. There's a tentative date set somewhere in February. There's a much higher likelihood they will be more meaningfully continued in March. So please stay up to date with us and keep checking our reports.